YouTube, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Gunplay TV. And today, as you can see on the table, we are taking a look at two of the industry's leading micro subcompact 9mm sidearms, the Sig Sauer P365 and the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Plus. Both of these, of course, 9mm striker-fired varieties from their respective manufacturers aimed primarily at concealed carry. So before we get into the comparison, I'm going to ask that if you haven't already, pause this video now, scroll down, take a look for that subscribe button, and once you found it, go ahead and give that a click for me. I do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get straight into the comparison.
Reach for the sky.
Alright guys, and so here we are. I've done a number of comparisons between similar firearms in the past, and I've been meaning to get my hands on a Shield Plus for quite a while. Now, those of you who are familiar with the M&P line and the Shield in particular will know that the Shield is not necessarily new to the market. Now, the Shield Plus came along here somewhat recently and has provided a number of enhancements over the previous Shield. Now, the Sig P365, if I'm not mistaken, last time I checked, is the most popular micro subcompact 9mm on the market today, okay? And so many of you will already be familiar with this, and chances are you've either bought one or are looking to buy one, and so hopefully this video will help you to make your decision. Of course, many users are going to have their brand loyalty. I know a lot of users are very acclimated with Smith & Wesson and have been for a long time, and others are Sig all day, every day, and especially now that they've won a number of military contracts, Sig has done nothing but jump in popularity. But we're going to take a look at both of these pistols, some of the pros and cons as they are offered. Of course, these are both base model varieties. Now, of course, that is something to call out, especially with the P365. Sig Sauer tends to do a variety and a litany of different variations of their pistols, and the P365 is no exception. Most recently, they've come out with the P365 XL Macro, which I'd love to get my hands on. Sig, if you're watching, feel free to shoot that over for review. But again, relatively slimmed down and base model options here from their two manufacturers. Now, any variations in the options as spec'd as we see here on the table, I will call out as we get into it. But to start things off, let's talk about features. Now, these pistols, of course, again, are going to be very much oriented for concealed carry. And before we go any further, I will note for the YouTube police and administrators watching, these firearms are safe and unloaded, and we are in a safe and controlled environment. Just want to demonstrate that for those of you at home. All right. Now, again, these pistols are going to be very well suited for concealed carry. In fact, I have holsters for each of these, and I've actually got a care package, if you will, from Vetter. If you want to check those out and you have either of these firearms and are looking for a holster, check out the video in the top right. But the primary selling point with both of these pistols is going to be its size, right? Now, in addition to that, Sig Sauer, again, kind of shook up the industry with the P365. They brought out a tiny, roughly an inch wide pistol, again 9mm, when a lot of these options of this size were previously 380 or a smaller caliber, and they still managed to get you 10 rounds out of the box. Now, I do have the 12-round extended magazine in here. And of course, I've got an extended or a somewhat longer magazine in the M&P Shield Plus as well. So we'll get into magazine capacity and some of the variations thereof here in a bit. But at the end of the day, the key selling point on these are going to be their size and their weight and overall concealability, right? For those of us who want to carry something every day, all day, and don't necessarily want to go with a full-size staccato P like myself, these are very incentivizing options. Now, one of the things that's going to jump out to you on both of these pistols, at least as configured here, are going to be the sight configurations, right? And I'll try to hold those up so we can see those here in the camera. Now, as we can see here on the Sig Sauer, we do have the X-ray day-night sights, and that's going to come with a green surround tritium front and glow-in-the-dark tritium rears. Whereas on our M&P Shield Plus here, we have an orange surround tritium front and standard tritium rears. Now, one thing to note is a slight variation, a slight difference in the design of those sights. Of course, they're not going to be interchangeable, and you'll need to go to their various manufacturers or supporting third-party manufacturers to get upgraded sights for the two of these. But again, you're going to be well served with either of these. Of course, being that they are concealed carry pistols, I do like that they include these bright front sights for easy target acquisition in daytime, and as well as having a tritium option there in night, so that you might be able to find your target in less than ideal lighting situations. Now, one thing I will note is with the Sig, these are going to be metal sights. And with the M&P, they are going to be metal as well. So again, you're not really getting cheaped out here with the Shield Plus or the P365. Very good sights out of the box. Of course, something that you can always upgrade, especially if you feel so inclined as to add an optic. Now, one thing I will point out is, as spec'd here on the table today, we do have the optics ready variety of the Shield Plus. Now, that is not the case for the P365 that we do have here on the table. Of course, it is an option. Again, Sig is known to offer a variety of options for their pistols, and the P365 is no exception. Again, you can get this optic ready, but because both pistols are not optic ready, we'll leave this out for consideration on the Shield Plus. Overall, I would say that the sighting systems are very, very nice, but it's going to be personal preference, right? For me, I do like having the green front, so let that say what it will. That's going to be a decision that you'll have to make on your own as far as your personal preference. Now, another component that I do like to call out in these comparisons are going to be the slide release. Now, this is something that you're going to actuate and utilize quite often, whether you're locking the slide back as just demonstrated, or you are sending that slide home. Now, again, with the Sig P365, it's going to be relatively low profile. I have found to have no issues with this particular slide release, slide catch, okay? Now, one thing I will note, with the M&P Shield Plus, they have made some improvements over the previous Shield. Now, on the old Shield models, this slide catch, slide release was extremely hard to actuate. I found that it was pretty much useless when trying to send that slide home. They have fixed that one way or another, and it is functional now, okay? And so at the end of the day, when it comes for both of these and their slide releases, I imagine it'll be due to personal preference and potentially familiarity with either platform, right? If you got an M&P at home, you'll probably be more familiar with the Shield Plus slide release. I find both of them to work flawlessly, and I'm happy to say that, considering I was not a fan of the original M&P Shield. The Shield Plus closes that gap for the most part, if not entirely. Both of these slide releases, slide catches are very, very usable. If I had to give it to one or the other, I might say that the P365 is a hair easier to use, but again, I'm a Sig guy and I use Sigs all day, every day, and so I find that maybe it's just, again, brand loyalty, personal preference, right? So let that say what it will. Now, another thing that I want to bring to your attention while we're on the topic of slide releases is going to be the mag release. Now, of course, on the P365, we can see here, it is going to be quite a bit lower profile than you have on your Shield Plus. Now, there are some pros and cons to either. Now, it being lower profile means that you might have a harder time pressing that in when you really need to drop that magazine, but it also means you're probably going to have less inadvertent magazine releases when it's pressed up against your body and concealed carry, right? And so again, it's going to be personal preference. If you really do value having a slide release that is going to be easy to press, I've got to give the point to the M&P Shield Plus. It really is no comparison there, right? This slide release is very, very low profile. You can see that it's actually been worn down quite a bit as I've worn it against my body. So I imagine that is part of the design philosophy, but again, when it comes to use, that may or may not present an issue for you. Of course, it's going to come down to training and familiarity with your firearm. So make sure that you're getting out there, putting in the reps. Now, again, both of these mags will drop free. I'm very pleased with either of these, right? They both seem to slide in and out without hindrance, and so that's of course very nice. Those reloads should be smooth and easy, provided that you can get your pinky or your palm out of the way, being as these are such small firearms. Now again, keeping in mind that these are concealed carry oriented pistols, they are both going to come with a flush fit 10 round magazine, right? I've actually got the Smith & Wesson flush fit 10 rounder here. You're gonna get something very similar to that when you get your P365. Now, if you've got a small firearm like this, chances are you're gonna want to be able to get your pinky on the sidearm, right? And so many users, of course, opt to go with one of the longer magazines, whether that's included in the box or something that you purchase extra, like I did with my Sig Sauer here. Now, in the case of the Smith & Wesson, you're actually gonna get 13 plus 1 rounds when you use that somewhat extended magazine, right? And it's gonna, of course, give you that extra purchase for your pinky there. And with the Sig Sauer P365, unfortunately, you do only get 12 rounds with the kind of extended pinky grip magazine, right? It's a 1 round difference, but ultimately that might be the swaying factor in a decision between the two of these, right? So you are gonna get up to 13 plus 1 in the Smith & Wesson. You're gonna get 12 plus 1 in the P365. Now, of course, there are a variety of third-party manufacturers that'll make different base plates for either. You can get more or less depending on what you wanna do, but out of the box with stock factory options, M&P takes the cake on magazine and magazine capacity. Now on to yet another category that's going to be very important when dealing with firearms, especially those of this size, is going to be the ergonomics and the grip. Now of course this is going to be one of those subjective things, right? If you've got more reps on an M&P, you're probably going to feel more at home on this particular pistol. And same thing again with the Sig. Now as I hold both of these, I've got to say that the M&P does feel a bit bigger. We'll get them on the scale here in just a bit after we go through some more of these features. The Sig feels a little slimmer in hand, but I do find that they both tend to point very similar. So again, that's going to be something that you're going to have to get both of these in hand. If you like something a little bit larger, maybe you have a bit of a larger palm, you might be more inclined to go with the M&P. Now, neither of these are going to have the adjustable palm swells on the rears. Now for the P365, Sig Sauer does tend to offer a variety of different frames, and that's something that you can look into for the P365, but as they are configured out of the box, there is no adjustability in sizing other than maybe your extended magazine to get you a pinky onto that grip. However, as far as ergonomics, I've got to say they are very well matched. I'd say that the bore axis, again, is going to be very similar between the two. It's really going to be personal preference, right? I feel that I've got a tighter grip on the P365, but that's primarily because it is smaller and I feel like I've got more hand on the gun. With the Shield Plus, it feels more akin to a slightly larger pistol, and so if you're more familiar with a larger firearm, you might be able to pick this up and run with it just a bit easier. So keep that in mind. Of course, it's going to be personal preference at the end of the day, but I think that they're both very well matched as far as ergonomics. Now, one thing that might be a make or break factor for you, especially considering that these are going to be concealed carry, is going to be the grip and the grip texture. You are going to get something of a more aggressive grip texture on the M&Ps, if I might say so. Again, neither of these are the most aggressive. In fact, I find that the more that I've used my Sig, the more that I've carried it, that texture has kind of worn itself down just a bit to where it's comfortable all day, every day. But I think that the texture is a bit more aggressive on the M&P. But again, your mileage may vary. So if you can, pick both of these up and check it out. But I think you get quite a bit more grip on the M&P. Of course, both of them are going to have a very similar texture. But one thing that I will say is you do get grip all the way up into that trigger guard on the M&P, whereas on the P365, it's smooth just there where your middle finger would wrap around the firearm. You may or may not like that, so just something I thought I'd call out. Now, I alluded to this previously, but of course the size and weight of the firearm, especially when you're going to be concealed carrying, is going to be a consideration. So I've got my scale here, and we will start off by weighing the P365 empty with no magazine. All right, so we've got this set to ounces, and it is tiered at 0. The Sig P365 with no magazine stock configuration is going to come in at 16.35 ounces. Okay, so certainly not a very heavy gun, especially when compared to some of the larger carrier compact style options. Now again, the same thing with the Shield Plus. Only difference, of course, being is we do have an optic plate on there, maybe a couple extra screws, but I don't imagine that that'll throw off the weight a whole lot. Now the M&P is going to come in at 17.15 ounces, so a bit heavier, but as we can see, also a larger firearm, just a hair longer than the P365, and I'll make sure that I throw those measurements up on the screen. But all in all, very, very small firearms, very well suited to concealed carry. You are just going to get a slightly larger profile with the M&P. Now that might not be an issue. I don't imagine that either of these will present issues when carrying, and so if you do want something larger, maybe just for familiarity's sake or ease of use, the M&P is certainly worth considering if you don't want to look at some of the larger P365s, as again, Sig makes a ton of varieties of each of their pistols to try to suit everybody, I suppose. Now, of course, both of these pistols are going to kind of present themselves as mid-level concealed carry options, and there's nothing too crazy when it comes to their materials and composition. I'll try to roll those up on the screen as I talk through this, right? They are both, of course, going to have a polymer frame and a alloy slide and pretty standard barrels, right? We're not getting any bull barrel material here, anything too crazy. I will note that the barrel on the M&P is a bit beefier, probably lending itself to a bit of a heavier weight as we saw here previously, but overall nothing too crazy. When you pick these up, you're going to get the more or less standard materials that you've come to know from both of these manufacturers, especially from their more modern offerings, right? So metal on polymer, and of course you've got the metal frame housed within each of their frames, right? Now, one area which you will be able to see right off the bat where the construction is a bit different, of course, is going to be the triggers, and this is something that the Shield Plus has brought to the table over its predecessor, the Shield, right? So we'll start with the M&P. It does have a flat-faced trigger this time around. Now, the previous M&P had kind of a hinged curved trigger. Pretty much everybody, including myself, hated that trigger. This is a lot better, okay? And so when picking up the P365, of course, you do have the curved trigger. Now, of course, once more, kind of the name of the game for Sig, they have a ton of options. You can get a flat trigger for your P365, but out of the box with the base model, as we see here, you are going to get the curved trigger. Now, they both are very smooth. Again, you're going to get a metal trigger on the Sig, a polymer trigger on the Shield Plus. But one thing I will say is the take up feels a bit smoother on the Sig. You can actually hear it, right? It's a bit noisier on the Shield Plus. It's a bit smoother on the P365. I do like that. But what we will do now is try to go through these triggers here side by side and just see what we can get. Very similar amount of take up. Little creep from the Sig. Okay, interesting. So I will say that it felt like the M&P, the Shield Plus here, is a bit crisper of a break. Oh, that's nice. And again, much better over its predecessor, the regular Shield, right? That's a pretty good trigger considering that there's no upgrades or anything within this. Of course, you can get the performance center variety of this particular firearm, which is going to get you probably even more tactility out of the trigger, but that is very nice. Now comparing it to the Sig once more, a bit more take up and creep in the Sig trigger, I've got to say. So if I had to give the edge to one of these triggers, I'd have to go with the M&P Shield Plus. It's just a sharper, a crisper trigger. Again, you guys know I love Sig, and I'm probably going to be inclined to upgrade the trigger in my P365 after checking this thing out. So I will say that the trigger in this M&P Shield Plus is no joke. It's going to take the cake over the P365. Now, of course, one of my favorite categories when comparing any two pistols is going to be the looks and the aesthetics, right? And this, of course, is going to be one of those subjective areas, so I'll preface this section by saying that. But I will say that looking at two of these, I've got to give it to the P365. It's just a sleeker design. I'm not really a fan of these fishgill style serrations on the Shield Plus. However, some of the slide cuts that they do, including this kind of recession here that they've put in the slide, I am a big fan of. I see that on the larger M&Ps. I've always liked it. It does look a little bit better on the big boy M&Ps, but the Shield just doesn't do it for me. It's primarily, you know, those fishgill slide cuts and the frame, right? The frame isn't bad. Of course, it just doesn't speak to me as much as the P365, right? This is just a bit sleeker of a frame. Now, of course, looks, again, gonna be very, very much subjective. But overall, I think I've got to give it to the Sig. Now, one thing I did neglect to mention when I was talking about the high-level features is you do get a loaded chamber indicator on the Shield Plus, so you can quickly peek down into that hole, see brass, and know whether or not you've got a loaded chamber or not. Now, with the Sig, it's also worth noting that you do get that as well. There's a small rectangular cut here on the top that you should be able to peek down into and see brass, provided that the chamber is loaded or otherwise, right? And so that's always going to be a nice safety feature. But aside from that, I think I've got to give the looks to the P365. It's just a sleeker pistol overall. Now, of course, probably the most important consideration, especially in this inflated economy in which we live currently, is going to be the price. Now, I'm happy to say that both of these tend to come in around the same ballpark. I'd say that you can get these anywhere from $400 to $500, $550, depending on where you look. Of course, you may or may not find a sale. I know my buddy who picked this up managed to get this at a great price, including a number of magazines for close to the MSRP of the Sig. It just depends on when and where you're shopping, but they are very comparably priced. But I think at the price, you're going to be well served with either, okay? And so, of course, that brings me to which one would I personally pick up. Again, it's a tough choice. I very much like the trigger more on the M&P, but I like the sights and the form factor more of the P365. I also like that you get an extra round out of the M&P, right? You never know when you'll need that extra round, God forbid. But I also like the fact that I get a rail on the P365. Now, of course, this is not a standard Picatinny rail, but it does present a number of options when it comes to aftermarket lights. You can do the same thing with the M&P, but there's no rail. Those lights have to clip onto the trigger guard. I'm not a fan of that. Okay, and so for me, I think I would probably stick with the Sig. Call me biased. But I think that if given the opportunity, I would double down on that choice. Now, again, you're going to be well served with either of these pistols. As I said in the beginning, I think that it's going to be largely the camp in which you reside, right? Are you more inclined to rock with Smith & Wesson and M&P, or have you been a Sig Sauer guy for a while, if not the past couple months since they won the NGSW contract? And so, again, largely going to be preference at the end of the day. My preference, of course, is going to be Sig Sauer. Tried and true for me, right? My first pistol was a Sig, and I tend to gravitate towards the Sigs in most cases. Now, of course, there are going to be areas where the M&P is going to be stronger than the P365, round capacity, the mag release, the trigger, of course. But ultimately, the choice is going to rest with you. If you're okay with going with a larger pistol, or you're more inclined to go with a larger pistol, and you want all those extra features like the better mag release, the extra round, and the better trigger, the M&P Shield Plus is certainly going to be the one that you want to go with. Again, if you like something sleek, simple, and maybe you don't carry it all the time like myself, the P365 is a good backup option. Again, I carry my Staccato P on a daily. This is just for the warm weather months when I'm wearing shorts or something very light. Again, I very much like the M&P. I think I might come back to grab one of those down the line, but time will tell. But if you find that you disagree with my opinion or my summation in any way, please go down in the comments and let me know where I fucked up. Happy to receive you guys' feedback, and I love to get comments from the viewers, all right? And so if you found this video educational, inspirational, or entertaining in any way, shape, or form, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, leave a like and a comment. It really does help to push these videos through the algorithm. With all that being said, I'm gone.